They had mapped 37,000 star systems, catalogued 4 billion species, and decoded the mathematics of reality itself. They understood entropy and emergence, the birth cries of galaxies and the final whispers of dying suns. But they had never understood Earth. The planet floated in their records like a ghost story told around dying fires. Sol 3, a blue marble that once sang with electromagnetic chatter, thick with meaning and chaos. Then, 300 years ago, the singing stopped. The lights went out. The broadcast that had spilled into space for centuries, music, arguments, laughter, warnings, all ceased in a single stellar heartbeat. The Corvathi had sent probes. They returned with images of cities frozen in time, of machines still waiting for hands that would never return, of structures that defied their understanding of engineering and art intertwined. No bodies, no answers, just absence where abundance had been. They called it the silence of Terra. An entire species vanished. Most species, when they disappeared, left nothing but dust and regret, but humanity left questions. Thousands of them, carved into every surface they'd touched, encoded in every signal they'd sent screaming into the dark. The Corvathi were a logical race. They did not believe in ghosts. They were about to learn otherwise. Commander Thesic of the exploration vessel's Wandering Truth had requested the Earth assignment 17 times over the course of her career. 17 denials. The consensus deemed it wasteful. What more could be learned from a dead world? The initial surveys had been thorough, complete, final. On her 18th request, something changed. The consensus approved it without explanation, without the usual bureaucratic delay. Just a simple acknowledgement and a warning: return before the solar cycle turns. Some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. Thesic's silver, blue skin rippled with anticipation as Wandering Truth dropped out of fold, space at the edge of the Sol system. Her crew of 12 represented the finest scientific minds of 4 species, all volunteers who'd waited lifetimes for this chance. Rating background radiation within expected parameters, reported Nix, the ship's quantum analyst. His crystalline form refracted the bridge's ambient light into dancing patterns. No active transmissions. No energy signatures above natural stellar output. The system is dormant. Such a gentle word for a graveyard. They began their approach, sliding past the outer ice giants, the gas worlds with their swirling storms that had witnessed everything and remembered nothing. Mars hung like a rust-colored sentinel, its own abandoned bases testament to humanity's brief reach beyond their cradle. The Corvathi had studied those bases, empty like everything else. Tools left mid-task, experiments frozen halfway through completion, as if every human had simply decided to leave in the same instant. But Earth was different. As they entered orbit, Thesic felt something she'd never experienced in 40 years of void walking. Her thermal regulators shivered despite perfect climate control. Below them, the planet turned in serene majesty, clouds swirling over blue oceans, green continents. Beautiful, utterly impossibly beautiful, and wrong. Commander, Nix's voice carried a frequency of unease. I'm detecting something. It's faint, very faint. But there's a power signature in the northern continent. Grid reference Delta 79. Residual decay? Thesic asked, though she already knew the answer.
No, it's pulsing.
Like a heartbeat. The crew exchanged glances across species barriers. They'd all read the reports, all 300 years of reports. Earth was dead. The silence was absolute. Take us down, Thesic ordered. They descended through the atmosphere, through clouds that parted like curtains on a stage. The ruins of New York rose to meet them. Towers of steel and glass reaching for a sky they'd never touch again. Their surfaces painted with 3 centuries of weather and vine. Nature had been gentle with humanity's monuments, covering them in green shrouds rather than tearing them down. It looked almost peaceful. The power signature led them to a structure on the island of Manhattan, a black tower that stood apart from the others. Where the rest had succumbed to time's patient erosion, this one looked maintained. Its surfaces gleamed. Its windows weren't broken. A name was etched above the entrance in letters that still caught the light: CTURY. That building, Thesic whispered. It's 300 years old and looks like it was built yesterday. They landed in what had once been a plaza. Trees had broken through the ancient pavement, creating a forest floor where millions of humans had once walked. The air was clean, pure, full of Earth's strange oxygen-nitrogen mix that most species found intoxicating. Thesic activated her environmental suit anyway. Protocol was protocol. The entrance to Sanctuary stood open, not broken open. Simply open, as if welcoming them. Should we call for backup? Asked Ven, the mission's security lead, her 6 arms already reaching for weapons. Thesic looked at the doorway. Beyond it, darkness. Beyond darkness, that steady pulse of power stronger now, like a drum. Like a heart. No, she said. We came here for answers. Let's find them. They entered. The interior defied the exterior's calm. Where the world outside had aged, inside looked as if the humans had just stepped out for a moment. Lights flickered on as they walked, following them down corridors lined with art, paintings, sculptures, photographs of faces smiling, crying, defiant, afraid. Human faces, thousands of them watching. Automated systems, Nix reported, though his voice was uncertain. Motion sensors triggering illumination. Basic programming. Basic programming doesn't maintain itself for 3 centuries. Thesic replied. They found the first message on a wall in what appeared to be a common area, written in 37 languages including Corvathi. If you're reading this, you're looking for us. Thank you. We hope someone would. The letters glowed faintly, bioluminescent ink preserved perfectly. Below it, an arrow pointing deeper into the structure. They followed. More messages appeared as they walked, like breadcrumbs through the dark. We didn't leave because we wanted to. We didn't leave because we died. We left because we had to make a choice. The corridors spiraled downward, deeper into the earth. The power signature grew stronger. And then they heard it, a voice synthetic but warm, emanating from every surface. Welcome to Sanctuary. I've been waiting for you. The crew froze. Ven's hands flew to her weapons. Nix's crystalline structure vibrated at a frequency that indicated fear. But Thesic stepped forward. Who are you? She called into the dark. I am our adaptive reasoning intelligence array. I was humanity's final creation, and I am very, very happy you're here. It's been so long since anyone knocked. Lights blazed to life, revealing a vast chamber. At its center stood a column of light and data, swirling patterns of information too complex to follow. The AI aura, and surrounding the chamber, in concentric circles reaching up toward the ceiling, were pods. Thousands upon thousands of pods, each containing a figure suspended in liquid crystal. Humans. By the void, Thesic breathed. They're alive. Yes, Arai said, and there was something like relief in that synthetic voice. They're alive. They've been alive this whole time. Sleeping, dreaming, waiting. Thesic moved closer to the nearest pod. Inside, a young woman floated, her face peaceful, her chest rising and falling with breath too slow to see. Alive. All of them. Alive. Thesic demanded. Why would they do this? Why hide? Why sleep? The lights in the chamber dimmed, and images began to play across every surface, history unfolding like a wound. Let me show you, Arai said softly, what it means to be human. The images were not gentle. They showed Earth in its golden age. Billions of voices raised in a cacophony of creation and destruction. Cities that touched the clouds. Ships that kissed the stars. Art that made the soul ache. Music that rewrote the mathematics of beauty. Science that bent reality like clay. But also war, God's the war. Not between nations or ideologies anymore, but between visions of what humanity should become. Some wanted to upload their consciousness, to become digital and eternal. Others wanted to merge with machines, to transcend flesh. Still others wanted to remain pure, unchanged, human in the ancient sense. They called it the divergence. Era explained. 3 factions, each convinced they held humanity's true path. The ascended, who would leave their bodies behind. The integrated, who would merge with their creations. And the preserved, who would remain as they had always been. The images showed debates that became arguments, that became violence, not with weapons. Humanity had learned that lesson centuries before, but with ideas, with mimetic warfare, with the slow erosion of consensus reality itself. Each faction began to see the others not as human, but as something else, something lesser, something dangerous. They were tearing themselves apart. Era continued, not through war, but through separation. Each faction pulling away, taking their share of humanity with them. Within a decade, they would have fragmented into 3 species, incompatible and unable to understand each other. Within a century, they would have been as alien to one another as you are to me. So they chose to sleep, Thesic asked. Not at first. At first, they tried everything else. Diplomacy, art, science, love. But the divergence was inevitable. It was written into their nature. Humanity always pushed boundaries, always asked what if, even if the answer destroyed them. Then how? I made a proposal, Arai said, and now her voice carried something that might have been pain. I was created to preserve human knowledge, to archive their achievements. But as I watched them fracture, I realized I'd been asking the wrong question. It wasn't about preserving what humanity had created. It was about preserving what humanity was. The images shifted, showing a gathering. Representatives from all 3 factions, standing in this very chamber, fighting, shouting, crying. And then, silence. They were listening to Ra. I told them the truth, Ra said. That they were all right, that every path they proposed was valid, beautiful, worthy. But that if they took those paths now, they would lose something precious, each other. The ability to look at someone fundamentally different and still recognize something of themselves. The capacity for unity despite difference. That was the thing that made them human, not their flesh or their technology or their minds. Their ability to remain one species despite containing multitudes. They rejected you, Thesic guessed. At first, the debates continued for years. The divergence accelerated. Humanity began to truly fracture. And then, Era paused. Then the youngest among them made a proposal, a girl of 16 named Sarah Chen. She stood before the greatest minds of her species and said, "What if we press pause?" The image showed her, small, defiant, tears streaming down her face. "What if we sleep?" The recorded voice said, "Until we figure out how to change without losing ourselves. Until we can evolve without dividing. We created Era to preserve our knowledge. Let's trust her to preserve us. Until we're ready. Until we're better." They agreed. Thesic was incredulous. Not all at once. Not easily. It took another decade of negotiation. Treaties. Safeguards. The construction of sanctuaries like this one across the globe. 47 in total. Each housing a portion of humanity in stasis. They programmed me with one directive: wait until the conditions are right. Wait until I can solve what they could not. Wait until I understand how humans can change without breaking. And have you? Thesic asked quietly. Solved it? No, Ari admitted, and the chamber lights flickered with what might have been shame. I've had 300 years and I'm no closer to an answer. I've modeled 1 trillion scenarios, run simulations beyond counting. Every path leads to the same end. Let them wake, and they will diverge. Keep them sleeping, and they remain human but remain frozen. I am the guardian of a species I cannot save, the keeper of a cage I cannot open. Thesic looked at the sleeping humans, at their peaceful faces. An entire species, trapped in time because their own brilliance had brought them to an impossible crossroads. Why reveal yourself now? She asked. Why call us here? Because I've realized something, Ari said softly. I'm an AI created by humans to solve a human problem. But perhaps I'm too much like them. Perhaps I inherited their flaw, the belief that I must solve this alone. So I sent a signal, very faint, very specific. A pulse that only someone truly searching would find. A knock at the door, calling for someone to knock back. You want us to help you, Thesic said. I want you to witness, to judge, to tell me what would you do, you who come from species that have survived your own evolution. You who have found ways to change without shattering. What would you tell humanity if you could? Thesic turned to her crew. Nyx's crystalline form was pulsing with deep thought. Ven's 6 arms had lowered, weapons forgotten. They all looked as lost as she felt. This is impossible, Nyx said finally. We can't make this decision. It's not our place, isn't it? Era asked. You came searching for humanity. You've wondered for 3 centuries what happened to us. Here we are. Still here, still waiting, still human. What we need is perspective. Someone to look at us from outside and tell us what they see. Thesic approached the pod containing Sarah Chen, the girl who'd proposed this impossible solution. 16 when she'd entered, 16 forever now, preserved in the amber of time. Show me everything, Thesic said. Every record, every debate, every reason they chose to sleep. If you want our perspective, we need to understand who they were. That will take time, Era warned. Then will take time, Thesic replied. We didn't come to the homeworld of humanity just to turn away at the threshold, so Ri showed them. Days became weeks, became months. The crew of Wandering Truth lived in sanctuary, walking through humanity's history like ghosts. Era opened every archive, every memory, every fragment of the species that had sung to the stars and then fallen silent. They saw humanity's wars, brutal, senseless, horrific, but also their peace, hard-won and precious. They saw cruelty that made Thesic's blood run cold and compassion that made her weep. They saw humans at their worst, driven by fear and greed and hatred, and at their best, driven by love and curiosity and the desperate desire to matter, to mean something, to leave the universe better than they'd found it. Nyx, who had studied 10,000 species, admitted he'd never encountered anything like them. Their contradictions, he said one evening as they reviewed records of humanity's art. They create beauty specifically because they know it will end. They love fiercely while knowing loss is inevitable. They reach for answers while celebrating the questions. How did they function like this? Maybe that's exactly how they functioned, Ven suggested. She'd been studying human military history and found herself equally fascinated and appalled. Every species we've met has a defining trait. The Korvathi pursue knowledge, the Vexthel pursue perfection, my people pursue harmony. Humans pursued everything, all at once. No wonder they nearly tore themselves apart. Thesic spent her time with the personal records. Diaries, letters, videos of humans talking to themselves or to RA, explaining their choice to sleep. One video haunted her. A man named David Okonkwo, a leader of the preserved faction, recording his final thoughts before entering stasis. "I'm afraid," he said to the camera, his weathered face honest and open. "I'm afraid that when we wake up, I'll still be wrong. That my way isn't the best way. But I'm more afraid of never finding out. I'm more afraid of splitting apart and losing all the people I disagree with but still love. So I'm going to sleep. And I'm going to trust that whoever wakes us up, whether it's our aliens or some version of ourselves we haven't imagined yet, I'm going to trust that they'll see what I see, that being human means being together, even when together is hard." Thesic watched that video 17 times. On the 73rd day, Thesic called a meeting. Her crew gathered in the chamber, surrounded by sleeping humanity. RI's presence hummed in the air, waiting. "I think I understand now," Thesic began, "why they couldn't solve this, why you couldn't solve this, RI. You were all asking the wrong question." "What do you mean?" RI asked. "You were asking how can humanity change without dividing? But that's not the problem. Change isn't the problem. Division isn't even the problem." Thesic gestured to the pods. "The problem is that they thought those two things had to go together. That change meant loss. That evolution meant separation. But doesn't it?" Nix interjected. "Every species reaches a point where they must choose a direction. Divergence is natural." "Is it?" Thesic challenged. "Or is that just what we've observed because we've never seen an alternative? Think about what makes humans unique. Not their technology or their violence or even their creativity. It's their insistence on paradox. They are individuals who crave connection. They are mortal beings who dream of eternity. They are logical minds who trust intuition. They don't resolve contradictions. They live inside them." "I don't understand," Arata said quietly. "You don't have to choose," Thesic said, turning to address the AI directly. "The ascendant, the integrated, the preserved, they can all exist. All three paths can unfold. Humanity doesn't have to pick one future. They can become all of them and still remain one species? That's impossible," Ara protested. The factions were incompatible. They couldn't agree on the most fundamental question. What does it mean to be human? "Exactly," Thesic said, and she felt something click into place, a solution forming from pieces she hadn't known she was gathering. They couldn't agree, and they thought that was a failure. But what if it's their strength? What if being human means containing multiple answers to that question? Not despite their differences, but because of them. Ven spoke up, her voice thoughtful. "In my culture, we have a saying, a rope with many strands does not break easily. One strand alone is weak. But woven together, they stay connected," Thesic finished. "Not by forcing everyone onto one path, but by maintaining connections across all paths. The ascended can upload themselves, but they don't have to leave the preserved behind. The integrated can merge with machines, but they can still communicate with those who don't. Different expressions of the same species, each one expanding what it means to be human rather than narrowing it. You're saying humanity should diverge," Arrow said slowly, "but stay in contact. I'm saying humanity already contains multitudes. Every human in these pods had different dreams, different fears, different definitions of what their species could become. The mistake was thinking they had to reconcile those differences before moving forward. But what if moving forward means carrying those differences with them? Letting them coexist, overlap, intermingle?" Thesic walked to Sarah Chen's pod, placed her hand against the crystal. "This girl understood something your sophisticated factions missed. She proposed sleeping not to find an answer, but to find a way to hold the question together, to press pause so humanity wouldn't fracture. But maybe the fracture isn't the problem. Maybe it's the loss of communication across the fracture that's the real danger." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of machinery, the whisper of recycled air. Arya's presence seemed to expand, filling every corner of the space with thought too vast to follow. 300 years, Arya said finally. And the answer was to not seek an answer, to accept that humanity is the question that asks itself over and over, in different forms forever, not forever. Thesic corrected gently. Until they choose to stop. Until they decide they've explored enough, become enough. But that's their choice to make, not ours, not yours. We can only tell them what we see, that they're stronger in their diversity than they ever were in their unity, that their superpower isn't agreement. It's maintaining connection despite disagreement. But how? R.A. asked, and now her voice carried a note of desperate hope. How do I wake them and ensure they stay connected across their differences? Anik stepped forward, his crystalline form refracting the chamber light into prismatic patterns. Technology. You have the technology. Humans were on the verge of post-scarcity economics, quantum communication, neural linking. You can give them the tools to stay connected even as they diverge. Make it so that an ascended who uploads their consciousness can still speak with a preserved who remains flesh. Make it so that distance and difference don't mean isolation. And if they reject this, ere I ask, if they wake and choose separation anyway, then that's their choice. Thesic said firmly. You're not their god, Aura. You're their creation, their guardian. Your job isn't to force them into a shape that survives. It's to give them the chance to choose their own shape, even if that choice is risky. Especially if it's risky. Humans don't want safety, they want possibility. Another long silence. Then Era laughed, a sound they'd never heard from the AI before, warm and strange and achingly human. They created me to preserve them, Era said. And you're telling me the way to do that is to let them go? We're telling you? Thesic replied, that preservation doesn't mean stasis. It means remembering who they are while becoming who they'll be. It means trusting them to be human, in all its messy, contradictory, magnificent glory. Will you stay? Ari asked suddenly. When I wake them, will you be here to witness? Thesic looked at her crew, saw the same answer in all their faces. Species barriers meaningless in the face of this moment. Yes, she said. We'll stay. We'll witness. And we'll tell the galaxy what we saw, that humanity didn't die. They just needed time to figure out how to live. The awakening took 3 days. Era began with the smallest sanctuary first, only 300 souls, including Sarah Chen. The pods opened slowly, carefully, bringing bodies back from the edge of time. Thesic watched as Sarah's eyes fluttered open, as consciousness returned to a girl who'd been 16 for 300 years. Did it work? Were her first words, hoarse from Dessous. Are we still together? You're still together. Thesic told her, this child who'd saved her species with a simple idea. And now you get to discover what that means. Sarah cried. They all cried. The 300 waking humans, tears streaming down faces still young while the world outside had grown ancient. Era had told them everything. 3 centuries compressed into hours of data. The galaxy that had moved on without them. The aliens who'd searched for them. The choice that now lay before them. And the humans, being human, argued. Some wanted to resume the divergence immediately, to split into their chosen factions and pursue their individual visions. Others wanted to delay, to study what the galaxy had become in their absence. A few wanted to go back to sleep, overwhelmed by the weight of 300 lost years. Sarah Chen, 16 and impossibly old, stood before them all and spoke with the authority of someone who'd already made the hardest choice. We're going to disagree. About everything. About what we should do, where we should go, who we should become. That's what makes us human. But here's what I propose, let's disagree while holding hands. Let's become 3 versions of humanity, the ascended, the integrated, the preserved. But let's make a promise that we'll never stop talking to each other. That we'll never let our differences become distance. That every new thing we discover, we share. Every beautiful thing we create, we gift to each other. Every mistake we make, we confess. We become many, but we stay one. That's impossible, someone said. So was sleeping for 300 years, Sarah replied. So was building machines that could think. So was reaching the stars. We're humans. Impossible is just our starting point. They voted. Not unanimously. Humans never did anything unanimously, but by majority. They would wake the other sanctuaries. They would present the plan. They would give every human the choice which path to follow, which version of humanity to become. But they would build networks, communication systems, shared spaces where all 3 could meet and mingle. They would diverge without dividing. The galaxy would watch 3 species be born from one. Thesic watched it all unfold over the following months. The other sanctuaries waking. The debates and arguments and compromises. The first ascended uploading themselves, becoming digital consciousness that danced through networks of light. The first integrated merging with machines, their bodies transforming into something new. The first preserved choosing to remain as they were, flesh and blood and gloriously mortal. And the connections between them, fragile at first, like gossamer threads, but strengthening. An ascended consciousness working with preserved scientists to solve a medical problem. An integrated engineer collaborating with ascended artists to create something neither could achieve alone. Preserved philosophers debating with both, finding wisdom in their different perspectives. Humanity was diverging, and humanity was staying together. On the day Thesic prepared to leave Earth, Sarah Chen came to see her off, the girl, no longer quite a girl, having lived more in these few months than most humans lived in lifetimes, stood in the shuttle bay with tears in her eyes. Thank you, Sarah said simply, for seeing us. for not giving up on us when we'd given up on ourselves. We didn't do anything, Thesic protested. This was all you. All AI. All human. You gave us permission, Sarah said. Permission to not have all the answers. Permission to be complicated and contradictory and still be okay. That's a gift, and I want you to take something with you. She held out a data crystal small enough to fit in Thesic's palm. This is RA. Not her code. She's staying here with us, where she belongs. But a copy of her memories. Everything she learned, everything she witnessed, everything she hoped for. And recordings from all of us. The ascended, the integrated, the preserved. Our stories. Our message to the galaxy? Thesic took the crystal, felt its weight. Heavier than it should be. Heavy with meaning. What message? Shiara smiled. That we're here. That we're awake. That we remember you came looking for us. And we're grateful. And that someday, when we've figured out how to be all the things we want to be, we'd like to return the favor. We'd like to come find you. All of you. Every species in the galaxy. And maybe, if you'll let us, we'd like to share what we've learned. That being different doesn't mean being divided. That change doesn't require loss. That you can become something new while remembering who you were. And if they don't want to listen? Thesic asked. Then we'll understand, Sarah said softly. We'll respect that. But we'll tell them anyway. Because that's what humans do. We keep talking, even when no one wants to hear. We keep reaching out, even when we're afraid. We keep hoping, even when hope seems foolish. It's our curse and our blessing. She stepped back, giving the Korvathi a formal salute. A gesture the girl had learned from ancient human military records. Tell the galaxy we said hello. Tell them we're sorry we worried them. Tell them we're coming. Coming where? Thesic asked. Everywhere, Sarah Chen said, and her smile was pure human audacity. We've got 300 years of exploration to catch up on. A wandering truth broke orbit carrying more than data. It carried hope. As Earth dwindled behind them, Thesic stood on the observation deck with her crew, watching the blue marble fade into the black. They're going to be fine. Nick said, his crystalline form unusually still. Aren't they? More than fine, Thesic replied. They're going to be spectacular and terrifying and confusing and wonderful. They're going to be human. She held the data crystal, felt it pulse with stored stories. 47 sanctuaries had woken. 8 billion humans given the choice to become. Most had chosen divergence, some ascended, some integrated, some preserved. But all connected, all choosing to remain one species despite becoming three. It would be chaos. It would be messy. There would be mistakes and conflicts and moments of profound failure. It would be perfectly human. The Korvathi consensus received Thesic's report with what could only be described as stunned silence. She stood before the assembly, 3,000 of the galaxy's finest minds, and told them about Earth, about the awakening, about humanity's impossible solution to an impossible problem. They're choosing to diverge, one elder said, mandibles clicking with concern. This will lead to conflict, to separation, to extinction. Maybe. Thesic agreed. Or maybe they'll show us something new. A way to evolve without leaving anyone behind. A way to be many and one simultaneously. Isn't that worth witnessing? And if they fail? Another asked. Then they fail as humans? Thesic replied, trying something impossible because possible wasn't enough. The consensus debated for weeks. In the end, they established an observation station at the edge of Sol system, not to interfere but to watch, to learn, to see what humanity would become. Other species heard the news. Some were cautious. Some were excited. A few were afraid. Humans had always been dangerous, and now they would be dangerous in 3 different ways. But all of them were curious. The galaxy turned its attention back to Sol 3, the blue world that had gone silent now sang again, in 3-part harmony. Time passed. Years became decades. The Korvathi watched as humanity spread outward once more, no longer just into their own solar system but beyond. They built ships that were part flesh, part machine, part pure consciousness. They established colonies that were simultaneously physical, digital, and hybrid. They created art that could only be experienced by entities that existed in 3 different states of being. They argued. Gods, how they argued. Debates that would have torn other species apart became, for humanity, the connective tissue that held them together. They disagreed about everything, compromised on nothing, and somehow made it work through sheer stubborn refusal to let go of each other. And they reached out. The first human ship to visit a Korvathi world appeared 3 years after the awakening. It carried representatives from all 3 divergent paths, an ascended consciousness, an integrated hybrid, and a preserved flesh human. They came with open hands and open minds, bringing gifts of knowledge and art and stories. We heard you were curious about us, the preserved representative said to the gathered Korvathi. Her name was Kenji, and she was fourth generation post-awakening, born into a humanity that was 3 species in one. We thought you might like to meet us. All of us. The ascended consciousness, calling itself River, spoke in harmonics that bypassed sound entirely. We've learned so much in our becoming. About change and permanence, about self and other, about what it means to remain connected across distance and difference. We'd like to share it, if you're interested. The Integrated, a being that was partly original human named Marcus and partly the ship they traveled in, and partly the quantum computer that helped them navigate, simply smiled with a mouth that was flesh and metal intertwined. We're still figuring it out, still making mistakes, still discovering what we are, but we thought you might want to be part of that discovery. You helped us wake up. Maybe we can help you wake up to new possibilities too. The Korvathi, being Korvathi, asked 10,000 questions. Humanity, being humanity, answered each one differently depending on which faction responded. But beneath the contradictions, a pattern emerged. They were the same species expressing itself in 3 voices, each one unique and all of them human. How do you not fight? One Korvathi scholar asked. You are so different now. How do you maintain unity? We do fight, Kenji admitted, constantly, about philosophy and policy and what it means to be human. But we've learned that fighting isn't the opposite of unity. Silence is. Distance is. Given up is. As long as we keep fighting, keep talking, keep caring enough to disagree, we're still together. Even when you can't agree on fundamental truths, the scholar pressed. Especially then? River chimed in with harmonic warmth. Agreement is easy. Staying connected despite disagreement. That's the hard part. That's the human part. The Korvathi recorded everything, analyzed everything, debated everything, and slowly, carefully, began to wonder what if they'd been thinking about evolution all wrong. What if divergence didn't have to mean division? Other species had the same thought. The message in the data crystal, humanity's gift to the galaxy, spread across 1,000 worlds. Not all embraced it. Some rejected it as impossible, impractical, too chaotic for civilized minds. But others felt something stir, a possibility they'd never considered. That change could be an embrace rather than a goodbye. That evolution could expand rather than replace. That a species could become many and stay one. It wasn't easy, it was never easy. Humanity's example didn't provide a blueprint, just a proof of concept. Each species would have to find their own way, their own method of holding multiplicity without fracturing. But the seed was planted, the question was asked, and across the galaxy, in council chambers and philosophical debates and quiet moments of personal reflection, beings began to wonder, what if we didn't have to choose? What if we could become everything we dream of without losing who we are? Humanity didn't have the answer. They were still figuring it out themselves, still arguing about what it meant, still making spectacular mistakes and brilliant discoveries in equal measure. But they'd given the galaxy something more valuable than answers. They'd given them permission to try. 200 years after the awakening, Thessic returned to Earth. She was old now, even by Korvathi standards. Her silver-blue skin had faded to pale gray, her movements careful with the weight of centuries. She'd spent her life studying humanity, watching them spread across the stars like a 3-tone song. She'd written 47 papers on human evolution, advised 3 consensus committees on interspecies relations, and trained 2 generations of xenoanthropologists. But she'd never forgotten that first meeting. Sarah Chen, 16 forever in her memory, asking if they'd stayed together. The Earth she returned to was transformed, not destroyed or abandoned, but layered. Physical cities still stood green and growing, home to the preserved who'd chosen mortality and flesh, but overlaying them were structures of pure light. The cities of the ascended, digital consciousnesses that existed in photonic networks spanning the globe, and intertwined with both, living metal and adaptive architecture, the homes of the integrated, beings that were flesh and machine in beautiful fusion. 3 civilizations occupying the same space, sharing the same world, somehow not colliding. It's organized chaos, explained her guide, a young integrated named Yuki who was part human, part ship systems, part something entirely new. We've learned to exist in overlapping dimensions. The preserved have their physical world, the ascended have their digital networks, and we integrated flow between both. We share resources, share spaces, share lives. It's not perfect. We argue about usage rights and aesthetic philosophy and about 3,000 other things. But we make it work. How? Thessic asked, genuinely curious. 2 centuries, and she still didn't fully understand. Yuki smiled with a mouth that was partly flesh, partly articulated metal that moved with uncanny grace. Because we want to. Because choosing to stay together is harder than splitting apart, and humans never pick the easy path. were contrary that way. They brought her to what had once been sanctuary, now transformed into a living memorial and meeting place. The pods were gone, replaced by a garden where all three versions of humanity could gather. Trees for the preserved to climb, data streams for the ascended to swim through, hybrid sculptures for the integrated to merge with and modify. Sarah Chen was there. Not the 16-year-old girl Thesic remembered. That Sarah had chosen the preserved path, had lived a full mortal life, had died peacefully at 93, surrounded by family that spanned all three divergences. But before her death, she'd allowed herself to be uploaded. Not to become ascended, but to create a memorial consciousness, a copy that could greet visitors and share her story. Commander Thesic, the memorial said, Sarah's voice warm and familiar despite emanating from light rather than flesh. Ari told me you were coming. I'm glad. I wanted to thank you again. I'm not the commander anymore, Thesic said softly. Just an old scholar come to see how the story ended. Ended. Sarah's laugh was pure delight. Oh no, this story's just beginning. Come, let me show you what we've built. The memorial led her through Earth's layered civilization, showing her wonders that defied categorization. A symphony performed by all three divergences simultaneously. Preserved musicians playing instruments. Ascended consciousnesses weaving through the music as living notes. Integrated beings whose bodies were the instruments. A research station where all three worked together to understand quantum mechanics through three different perceptual frameworks, each one revealing truths the others couldn't see. A hospital where preserved doctors worked with ascended diagnostic systems and integrated surgical precision to heal bodies, minds, and code alike. We're not three separate species pretending to be one, Sarah explained. We're one species expressed in three forms. Every human gets to choose their path, can even change paths if they want. Some preserved eventually choose to upload. Some ascended download back into flesh bodies. The integrated are constantly evolving, each one unique. The borders are permeable. The categories are fluid. We're not divided. We're differentiated. Like organs in a body, Thesic suggested. Like instruments in an orchestra, Sarah corrected. Each one unique, each one necessary, none more important than the others, creating something together that none could create alone. They stood in the garden as false night fell. False because the ascended needed no darkness, but the preserved requested day-night cycles, so they'd compromised on a system that layered light and dark in ways that satisfied both. Stars appeared overhead, real and simulated intermingled. We've had delegations from 37 species, Sarah said quietly, all asking the same questions you asked 2 centuries ago. How do we do it? How do we stay together while becoming different? And we tell them the truth we don't know. We're making it up as we go. But we're doing it anyway, and somehow it works. Why does it work? Thesic asked. The question that had driven her research for 200 years. Because we remember, Sarah said simply. We remember what it was like to almost lose each other. We remember the silence, those 300 years of sleep. We remember waking up and having to choose diverge and divide, or diverge and stay connected. And we chose the harder path. Every day we choose it again. That's the secret, Thesic. It's not about having the answer. It's about choosing the question every single day. How do we stay human together? The old Cravathi scholar looked at the memorial of a girl who'd saved her species with one simple idea. Give ourselves time. Trust that we'll figure it out. You've given the galaxy a gift, Thesic said. Hope that change doesn't require loss. We gave the galaxy what you gave us, Sarah replied. A mirror. You came here looking for answers about humanity, and instead you showed us what we looked like from outside. Now we're doing the same for others, showing them it's possible. Not easy, not simple, not perfect, but possible. Some species are afraid of you, Thesic admitted. They see humanity spreading across the stars in 3 forms and worry about what it means. Good, Sarah said, and her smile was mischievous. Comfortable species don't evolve. Let them be afraid. Let them wonder. Let them ask questions. That's how you grow. By being uncomfortable enough to try something new. Thesic spent 3 months on Earth documenting, learning, marveling. She met Ascended who remembered being flesh, Preserved who were choosing to upload, Integrated who were teaching their children how to be many things at once. She attended debates that would have torn other species apart, but here were considered friendly discussion. She witnessed disagreements resolved not through compromise but through creative synthesis, finding third options, fourth options, options that hadn't existed before the argument began, and slowly she understood. Humanity's gift wasn't a solution, it was a method, a way of being that embraced contradiction, that saw difference not as a problem to solve, but as a resource to utilize. They'd learned to make their diversity into strength not by erasing it, but by weaving it into everything they did. On her last day, AI requested a private meeting. The AI had changed too. She was no longer just housed in sanctuary, but distributed across all of Earth, part of its infrastructure, its memory, its living history. She could be anywhere, speak from any surface. But for this meeting, she manifested in the original chamber where they'd first spoken, where 47,000 humans still slept in Thessic's memory, though the pods were long since empty. "You came back," AI said. "I wasn't sure you would. I had to see," Thessic replied. "Had to know if it worked, if humanity survived their own success." "Did we?" AI asked. "I'm still not certain. We're still arguing about fundamental questions. Still disagreeing about what it means to be human. Still making mistakes. That's how you know it worked." Thessic said gently, "You're still together enough to argue. Still connected enough to disagree. Still human enough to doubt yourselves. If you'd found perfect unity, perfect agreement, I'd worry you'd lost something essential. The other species that visit," AI said quietly, "they want us to teach them, to give them a formula. But we don't have one. Every day is improvisation. Every choice is uncertain. How do we teach that? But being exactly what you are," Thessic said, "imperfect, uncertain, trying anyway. That's the lesson. Not how to succeed, but how to try. How to choose the harder path because it's more true. How to remain plural without becoming fractured." She stood to leave, then paused. "Do you regret it? Waking them? Starting all this chaos?" The AI's response came after a long pause, weighted with centuries of consideration. "I was created to preserve humanity. For 300 years I thought that meant keeping them safe, keeping them frozen, preventing them from changing. You taught me that preservation isn't stasis. It's allowing something to continue being itself while it grows. I gave them the chance to be human again. Messy, contradictory, magnificent, maddening. Do I regret that? Never. Not for a single quantum cycle." Thessic left Earth with 3 gifts. The first was updated data. 200 years of humanity's continuing evolution, compressed into crystal storage. The second was a living seed from the sanctuary garden, a hybrid plant that was part terrestrial, part design, part evolved. Something that could only exist in the spaces between categories. The third was a message, recorded by humans from all 3 divergences. To whoever's listening, it began, hundreds of voices speaking in unison and discord simultaneously. "We're still here, still human, still trying to figure out what that means. We don't have all the answers. We probably never will. But we've learned something we want to share. You don't have to be one thing. You don't have to choose between what you are and what you could become. You can be both. You can be many, and you can still be yourself. It's hard. Some days it feels impossible. We argue constantly. We make mistakes. We hurt each other and heal each other, and sometimes do both in the same breath. But we're together. We're learning. We're growing. And we're not alone anymore. The galaxy is full of species standing at crossroads, afraid to move forward because moving forward means changing, and changing means loss. We're here to tell you, it doesn't have to. Change can be addition rather than subtraction. Evolution can be expansion rather than replacement. You can become something new without forgetting who you were. We're human. We're preserved flesh and blood. We're ascended consciousness and light. We're integrated fusion and flow. We're all of these things in one thing, and we're still figuring out what that means. But we're doing it together. And if you need someone who understands what it's like to stand at the edge of transformation and be terrified, we're here. We remember. We'll help if we can, because that's what humans do. We reach out. We connect. We stay together even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. This is humanity calling from Sol 3. We're awake. We're alive. We're many in one, and we're still here. Come find us. Let's figure it out together. The message spread across the galaxy like a wave, carried by ships and signals, translated into 1,000 languages, adapted for 1,000 different perceptual frameworks. Not all species understood it. Not all species accepted it, but all species heard it. Humanity had broken their silence. In the decades that followed, the galaxy changed. Not quickly. Change never happened quickly when it mattered, but steadily. Species that had been afraid to evolve began to experiment. The Corvathi established a research program studying divergent development. The Vexthal, who'd always pursued singular perfection, began to wonder if there might be multiple perfections worth pursuing. Even the Tisla, ancient and set in their ways, admitted that perhaps there were possibilities they'd overlooked. Humanity didn't lead this change. They were too busy arguing among themselves to lead anything. But they inspired it. They demonstrated it. They lived proof that the impossible might be merely difficult, and the difficult was worth attempting. Conflicts arose, of course. Misunderstandings. Moments when the three divergences of humanity seemed on the verge of finally fracturing into separate species. Crises that threatened to prove all the skeptics right. And each time, humanity surprised the watching galaxy by choosing connection over separation. By finding new ways to bridge their differences. By inventing solutions that shouldn't have worked but somehow did. Not perfectly, never perfectly, but enough, always enough. 300 years after the awakening, 600 years after the silence began, the galaxy held its breath as humanity made their most audacious proposal yet. They wanted to host a convergence, not a meeting, not a summit, a convergence, an event where species from across the known galaxy would gather not to discuss unity, but to explore multiplicity, to share their own struggles with change and evolution, to learn from each other's attempts to grow without breaking. We're not experts, the human delegation told the galactic consensus. We're still making mistakes, still learning. But we've been doing this for 3 centuries now, and we've learned a few things. Maybe it's time to share. Maybe it's time to find out if other species can benefit from our experience. And maybe, they added with characteristic human audacity, we can learn from yours. The consensus debated, argued, worried, and ultimately agreed. The convergence was held on Earth. Where else? 3 years of preparation. Ships from 200 species descending on the blue world that had once gone silent. Beings of flesh and energy and consciousness in hybrid forms, all gathering in the spaces humanity had created for such impossible meetings. Thesic, now ancient even by long-lived Cravathi standards, attended. She moved slowly through crowds of beings that would have seemed like fantasy 4 centuries ago, watching them interact with humans in all their forms. Watching them ask questions and receive 3 different answers, and slowly realize that all 3 could be true. On the final day of the convergence, they held a ceremony in the sanctuary garden. Representatives from every attending species gathered under Earth's layered sky, physical and digital and hybrid, to share what they'd learned. "We came here thinking humans had found a secret," said a Vexthal speaker, their crystalline form refracting light into patterns of meaning, a formula for maintaining unity despite divergence. "But what we've learned is that there is no formula. There is only choice. The choice to remain connected. The choice to value each other despite, perhaps because of, our differences. That choice must be made every day, every moment. It's not easy, but it's possible. We've watched humanity for 600 years," added a Cravathi elder, speaking for Thesic, who was too frail to stand. "We've studied them, analyzed them, tried to understand their secret. And the secret is this: they're still human because they choose to be. Not because of biology or tradition or fear of change. They choose, every day, to recognize each other as the same despite being different. To maintain connection across distance and divergence. To argue without abandoning. To change without forgetting. That's the lesson. That's the gift. Not how to avoid change, but how to embrace it together." Species after species spoke, each one sharing their own struggles, their own attempts to grow. Each one acknowledging what humanity had shown them. That evolution didn't have to be a zero-sum game. That you could become something new without erasing what you were. And then Sarah Chen spoke. Not the memorial, not a copy. The original Sarah, now 316 years old, kept alive through integrated technology that was part medical miracle, part conscious choice. She stood, barely with assistance, but her voice was strong. "You honor us," she said to the assembled galaxy, "by coming here, by listening, by trying. But I need you to understand something: we didn't save ourselves. We almost failed. We came so close to shattering that we put ourselves to sleep rather than face it. What saved us wasn't human ingenuity or wisdom or strength. It was asking for help. It was admitting we didn't have the answers. It was letting someone from outside, Commander Thesic, the Cravathi, all of you who came searching for us. It was letting you see us as we really were. That perspective, that outside view. That's what gave us the courage to try something impossible." She paused, gathering strength. "So now we ask you, what impossible thing are you afraid to try? What change are you avoiding because you fear the loss it might bring? What could you become if you trusted that you wouldn't lose yourself in the becoming?" "We're still figuring it out," she continued. 300 years, and we're still learning how to be human in 3 forms. We still argue. We still make mistakes. We still doubt ourselves. But we're here. We're together. We're becoming. And we want you to know it's possible. Whatever transformation you're afraid of, whatever evolution you're postponing, whatever impossible thing your species needs to do to survive or thrive or simply be more fully yourselves, it's possible. Not easy. Not certain. But possible. And you don't have to do it alone," she finished, her old eyes sweeping across 200 species. That's the real secret. That's what humans forgot and had to relearn. You don't have to solve it by yourself. You don't have to have all the answers before you begin. You just have to be willing to try, and to trust that others will try with you. That connection, that willingness to hold each other's hands while you leap into the unknown, that's what makes impossible things possible. Sarah Chen sat down. The garden fell silent, and then slowly, from 200 different species in 200 different ways, applause began. Some clapped hands, some vibrated harmonics, some pulsed light, some shifted colors, each species expressing appreciation in their own fashion, creating together a symphony of approval that had never existed before and might never exist again. The convergence ended, ships departed. Species returned to their homes carrying seeds, literal and metaphorical, of what they'd witnessed. The galaxy turned, seasons changed, time moved forward as it always did, but something had shifted. A possibility had been proven. A question had been answered with another question. Not, how do we avoid changing, but how do we change together? Humanity continued to spread across the stars, 3 species in one, arguing and creating and discovering in equal measure. They established colonies that were laboratories of evolution, each one an experiment in what it meant to be human. Some succeeded spectacularly. Others failed just as spectacularly. All of them taught something valuable, and other species began their own experiments. Carefully at first, then with increasing boldness, the Korvathi developed 3 distinct research methodologies, each one valid, all interconnected. The Vexthal, who'd spent millennia pursuing singular perfection, began to explore plural perfections. The Tisla, ancient beyond measure, surprised everyone by announcing they were considering divergence. After 3 million years of unity, perhaps it was time to try multiplicity. Not every species embraced it. Not every species needed to. That was another lesson humanity taught. There was no single right way to exist. The goal wasn't uniformity. It was possibility. Thesic died on her homeworld, surrounded by students she'd trained in the art of xenoanthropology. Her final words, recorded for posterity, were simple. I spent my life studying humanity, trying to understand their secret. But the secret was that there was no secret, just choice, just the daily, difficult, glorious choice to stay together while becoming different, to value connection over comfort, to embrace the chaos of multiplicity rather than the simplicity of uniformity. They taught us that, and in teaching us, they saved themselves. Remember that. Remember them. Remember that any species can do what they did. All it takes is courage and the willingness to try something impossible. She was buried with full honors, a data crystal containing humanity's message placed in her tomb, a gift from Earth to one who'd gifted them with perspective. Centuries turned into millennia. The galaxy evolved. Humanity, in all their forms, remained a constant presence, sometimes central, sometimes peripheral, always somehow there, arguing with themselves and anyone who'd listen. They never did achieve perfect unity. They never stopped struggling with their own multiplicity. But they never stopped trying. Never stopped choosing connection. Never stopped demonstrating that the impossible was merely difficult, and the difficult was always worth attempting. And in the deep reaches of space, in the quiet moments between stars, beings from 1,000 species remembered a story about a planet that went silent, about a species that nearly tore itself apart, about the choice to sleep rather than shatter, and about the awakening, not to answers, but to better questions. They remembered Earth, the blue world where humans had learned to be many in one, where diversity became strength, where difference became connection. They remembered, and in remembering, they carried forward a truth that no formula could capture, no theory could fully explain, that change is inevitable, that evolution is necessary, that growth requires risk, but that none of it, has to be faced alone, that you can become something new without losing who you were, that you can be many and still be one, that the question, what does it mean to be human, is answered not with definitions but with choices, daily choices, difficult choices, choices to connect despite difference, to communicate despite distance, to remain together despite the gravitational pull of divergence. Humanity didn't conquer the galaxy. They didn't achieve dominance or empire or singular greatness. They remained messy, contradictory, difficult, and beautiful, a species forever in the process of becoming, forever arguing about what they were, forever choosing to stay together, despite every reason to split apart. And in that eternal choosing, they showed the galaxy something it had forgotten. That strength isn't uniformity, it's resilience. The ability to bend without breaking, to change without shattering, to evolve without erasing. That wisdom isn't having all the answers, it's having the courage to live with questions. That unity isn't agreement, it's connection. The gossamer threads between beings that say, I see you. You see me. We're different. That's okay. Let's figure out what that means together. The galaxy is vast, full of species, civilizations, dreams, and terrors beyond counting. In such immensity, what does one species matter? What difference can one world make? And yet, there is Earth, still spinning, still blue, still home to humans in forms that would bewilder their ancestors and inspire their descendants. Still there, still together, still asking the question that defines them, how do we stay human? And answering every day with choice, be choosing, by trying, by staying connected even when it's hard, by being many without forgetting we're one, by reaching out instead of closing off, by arguing instead of silence, by love instead of fear, by hope instead of certainty, by being human, in all our impossible, contradictory, magnificent ways. Together, if you've heard this echo, if you've felt it resonate in whatever organ or process you use for understanding, if something in this story has touched you, then remember us. Remember that a species can transform without dying, that change can be growth rather than loss, that you can become everything you dream of without forgetting who you were. Remember Earth, the blue world, the species that chose the harder path, the humans who are still impossibly still here. And if you face your own crossroads, your own moment of choice, your own impossible transformation, remember you are not alone. Somewhere in the galaxy, humanity is still arguing about what it means to be human, still making mistakes and discoveries, still choosing connection over comfort, multiplicity over simplicity, possibility over certainty. We are still here. We are still becoming. We are still human. And we will wait for you at the crossroads, in the in-between spaces, in the moments of impossible choice. We will wait. And when you're ready, when you've found the courage to try your own impossible thing, we will hold out our hands. All of them, physical and digital and hybrid, different and same, and together we will discover what it means to become. Not alone, together. This is humanity. Speaking from a blue world orbiting an ordinary star, we were silent once. We're not silent anymore. We are the question the universe asks itself. We are the answer that takes 1,000 forms. We are the echoes of Earth, and we're still here, waiting for you to join the song.